In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on March 4th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Villanova versus DePaul. Villanova arrives with the bigger reputation and the cleaner record, sitting at 22-7 while DePaul comes in at 16-13, but the way these two have been playing lately makes this feel much closer than that gap suggests. DePaul has quietly turned Wintrust Arena into a tough stop on the schedule, stacking wins and turning that building into the kind of place where visiting teams do not relax for a single possession. Villanova, on the other hand, is walking into Chicago fresh off a humbling loss where St. John's ran them out of the gym, and that kind of short turnaround on the road can test even a polished group. Villanova's style this season leans on efficient half-court offense and solid guard play, and when everything is in rhythm they can look very steady, but that rhythm is under real stress right now. Losing starting forward Matt Hodge to a season-ending knee injury strips size, versatility, and a reliable option from their front line, which shrinks the rotation and forces more minutes and responsibility onto the remaining core. That kind of injury does not just change the box score, it changes how comfortable a team feels banging inside, switching defensively, and surviving foul trouble on the road. In a hostile arena, with one fewer trusted body, every whistle and every long rebound feels a little heavier. DePaul's front court, powered by physical rebounders and rim presence, is not flashy, but it is stubborn, and that stubbornness shows up when they get second chances and when they wipe the glass to finish a defensive stand. They are not racing up and down like a track team, yet they defend with enough discipline that opponents often have to grind deep into the clock and settle for jumpers that the crowd is very happy to howl at. That is exactly the kind of environment where a road favorite can play well and still struggle to separate on the scoreboard, because every little Villanova run gets answered by a Blue Demons burst fueled by noise, effort, and a couple of timely threes. From a betting perspective, DePaul has been far kinder to people backing them against the number than their recent history would make you expect, and that usually tells you the market has been a step slow to catch up to how competitive they have become under Chris Holtmann. They are not some miracle team, but they have a habit of hanging around, crossing that annoying "they still have a chance" line every time you look up at the scoreboard with 4 minutes left. Villanova, by contrast, has the profile of a strong program that wins plenty of games but does not always give you that comfortable breathing room when it is asked to win by margin, especially now that the rotation is thinner and the front court is patched together. Finished in single digits and never felt finished in single digits and never felt like a blowout from the underdog's perspective, even though the favorite escaped with the win. That kind of script tends to repeat itself when the underlying matchup stays the same or tilts even slightly toward the home dog, and here the injury news and the late season urgency lean that way. DePaul is still fighting for Big East positioning. The crowd knows this is a measuring stick game, and the Blue Demons have already shown they can trade punches with this exact Villanova roster for 40 minutes without blinking. Honestly, if you imagine this turning into another tight one where free throws and late possessions decide everything, it is a lot more comfortable sitting on the side that already starts the night with a stack of points in its pocket rather than asking the road favorite to clear real distance in a tricky building. As our first pick for this matchup, the DePaul Blue Demons to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The last time these two saw each other, they produced a game that felt more like a classic Big East slog than a modern track meet, with both teams working deep into the shot clock and the final score landing in that mid-range where defenses clearly had their say. Nothing about how these rosters have evolved suggests they are suddenly going to turn this into a wide-open run and gun show in early March. Villanova's offensive profile sits in that good but not explosive tier, scoring in the upper 70s on average, while DePaul lives closer to the low 70s on the scoreboard, and both sides pair that with defenses that are more respectable than they sometimes get credit for. DePaul in particular has made its season by keeping games in a more controlled lane, holding opponents under 70 on many nights and grinding out wins with effort on the glass and half-court defense rather than wild pace. If you have watched them at Wintrust this year, you know the pattern: long possessions, bodies flying for rebounds, coaches barking through most of the shot clock, and a scoreboard that creeps instead of races. The betting data backs up what your eyes would tell you. DePaul has been one of those teams that routinely lands below the projected number, a classic under friendly profile where solid defense, average offense, and a controlled tempo all team up on the total. Villanova is not exactly a chaos engine either, and with Matt Hodge out, their path to points leans even more toward jump shots and structured half-court sets rather than constant rim pressure and transition opportunities. That kind of shot distribution usually produces stretches where both teams trade empty trips, which is great for people holding an under ticket and pretty frustrating for anyone begging for a fireworks show. There is also the calendar to think about. Early March in the Big East is when every possession suddenly matters just a little more, and coaches tend to shorten rotations, trust veterans, and slow things down rather than pressing the gas for the fun of it. Both teams are jockeying for tournament positioning, and in that kind of spot you often see fewer risky passes, fewer heat-check threes early in the clock, and more deliberate sets that chew through time even when they end with decent looks. Honestly, it has the feel of a game where you could watch 3 or 4 straight possessions end with late clock jumpers or post-ups instead of quick transition buckets. Even if the shooting percentages end up reasonable, the combination of moderate pace, physical defense, and shortened rotations pulls the ceiling on the total down. It is not hard to sketch this one finishing in a range where both teams are somewhere around the mid-60s or low 70s, which gives plenty of room for the number to stay below expectations as long as there is not some wild overtime or fluke foul fest. Here is the thing: when you line up how these teams have actually played this season with how the market usually treats Villanova games, the quieter, more methodical script simply looks more realistic than a free-scoring shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Stanford versus Notre Dame. Stanford heads out to South Bend for a late-season Atlantic Coast Conference battle, and this one feels like a coin flip on paper. The line is short, with the home side only a tiny favorite, which tells you oddsmakers see these two as almost equal. If you look at their season profiles, both teams live in the same neighborhood, usually scoring in the mid-70s and giving up right around the low 70s. That small statistical gap still matters because across the full season Stanford has held a positive scoring margin while Notre Dame has floated much closer to break even. Recent form nudges things even more in one direction, with Stanford taking 4 of its last 5, including a 20-point smackdown of SMU and a steady win over Pitt, while Notre Dame's recent stretch includes getting blown out by Duke and needing overtime just to slip past NC State at home. Those are not just funny box scores you scroll past on your phone. They hint at which group is actually putting full games together right now. Injuries add another layer that you cannot ignore. Notre Dame is still working through a banged-up rotation, with key pieces like Kebunji, Marcus Burton, and Tommy Ahneman sitting out long-term, so the Irish are missing both interior presence and shot creation. Stanford's report leans more toward depth concerns, with Chisom Okpara done for the year and role players such as Anthony Batson, Krister Skrinda, and Talis Torrey carrying question marks, but the main engines of the lineup are still humming. That kind of difference shows up over 40 minutes, especially when foul trouble hits or the pace picks up for a few possessions. Stanford has also handled the move into its new league about as well as you could ask, sitting around an 18-11 overall mark and a 7-9 record in Atlantic Coast Conference play, which is respectable for a program adjusting to fresh travel and new scouting looks. Notre Dame, on the other hand, has lived closer to the basement of the conference at roughly 13-16 and 4-12, which paints the picture of a team still trying to figure out who it wants to be. Some predictive models that folks like to screenshot still lean toward the Irish, giving them something like a 60-40 edge at home, but that is more about venue and brand than clear superiority on the floor. When the spread stays this tight and the healthier, more informed roster is the one getting the points, it starts to feel less like you are chasing a Cinderella story and more like you are getting a small discount on the steadier profile. Honestly, the arena in South Bend will be loud. The history on those jerseys is real, but there is a very reasonable case that the visitors can hang inside a 1 or 2 possession window all night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Stanford Cardinal to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. You see a 96-90 overtime win against NC State. You see a 100-56 loss to Duke. And it is easy to assume this one is headed for more fireworks, especially with a recent run of high-scoring finals in Irish games both overall and at home. Those numbers catch the eye, and they stick in your head when you think about how this contest might feel. If you pull back from those extremes, though, the longer season picture looks calmer. Stanford games usually end with the Cardinal putting up points in the low to mid-70s and allowing around 72, while Notre Dame tends to sit in the mid-70s on both offense and defense, which sounds more like a grind than a track meet once you focus on Atlantic Coast Conference play. Stanford in particular is comfortable in the half court, making opponents work deep into the shot clock. And that defense that gives up about 72 a night has done a good job of cutting off simple assisted looks and forcing late, uncomfortable shots. That kind of style shifts a game from free-flowing runs to something closer to a long dentist appointment, not always pretty, but very friendly to a lower combined score. Notre Dame's recent string of high-scoring outcomes is real, but a lot of it has been juiced by outlier shooting nights and whistle-heavy games that turned into free-throw parades, and those are among the least stable parts of basketball from one night to the next. On top of that, the Irish are still managing a rotation without an interior anchor in Keba Neji, a primary creator in Marcus Burton, and extra size from Tommy Anneman, which can quietly slow tempo as the staff leans on a shorter bench and values control over chaos. When Stanford has been placed in the underdog role, the combined scores in those games have often landed on the lower side of the projected range, which fits the idea that their style drags opponents into a slower rhythm. Layer that with a late-season Atlantic Coast Conference whistle, a long cross-country trip on the legs, and two offenses that are capable but not exactly flamethrowers, and you start to picture a game living more in the 60s or low 70s than in a full-on three-point contest. All of this points toward a script built around longer possessions, more physical half-court defense, and a crowd that gets louder as each point feels a little more precious instead of watching the scoreboard spin non-stop. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida State versus Pittsburgh. Florida State walks into the Peterson Events Center looking like that loud, high-energy team that makes you feel tired just watching warm-ups. They push the ball, they shoot early in the clock, and they basically treat every possession like an invitation to turn the pace up another notch. Over the season, they have settled into a profile where the scoring lives in the high 70s, the shooting volume is heavy, and the three-point count climbs quickly once they find a rhythm. What really makes them tricky is not just the offense, it is the way they chase turnovers and live with a little chaos on defense, knowing that a couple of quick steals can turn into one of those 8-0 bursts that flip a game on its head. For opponents, it feels less like a standard half-court slog and more like trying to keep your footing in a game that keeps speeding up right when your legs start to feel heavy. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, has spent most of this season trying to crawl back to even, sitting at something like an 11-18 record where the margin is usually just a little bit on the wrong side. At home, they have not exactly turned their building into a fortress, more like a spot where results feel close to a coin flip instead of a sure thing. They score in the low 70s, they give up a touch more than that, and too often they let opponents get comfortable looks, especially on the inside where help arrives just a beat late. You can see it in the way teams attack the lane against them, with drivers and cutters testing the paint early because they trust that cracks will open if they stay patient. Against a group that likes to attack in waves, that little bit of softness can turn into foul trouble, long defensive stretches, and a lot of pressure on the offense to trade baskets just to stay attached. Florida State has also steadied themselves lately, putting together a 4-1 stretch in their last 5 outings that includes that confident road win at Georgia Tech, which quietly says a lot about their comfort playing away from home. Pittsburgh has bounced around in league play, sometimes hanging tough, sometimes fading, and there is a kind of inconsistency there that feels risky when you are facing a team that loves to turn small cracks into big momentum swings. When you think about this as a game that probably lives within a handful of possessions either way, the real question becomes which side you trust more to string together stops and scores when the building gets loud. With Florida State bringing the higher offensive ceiling, the recent momentum, and the kind of ball pressure that can turn a quiet stretch from Pittsburgh into a scoring drought, the scenario where the Seminoles finish this one a couple of possessions clear is not hard to picture. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida State Seminoles to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Florida State games already tend to sit in that high-scoring neighborhood, with their own offense living in the high 70s and their defense giving up plenty because they are more interested in pace and pressure than in squeezing every possession into a grind. They put up a lot of shots, especially from the perimeter, and when a team is near the top of the charts in both attempts and makes from three, the math tilts toward bigger swings and bigger totals. Even on nights when the percentages are just okay, the sheer volume keeps the number climbing, and when the shots actually fall, it can feel like the score jumps by 5 or 6 points every time you blink. Pittsburgh brings a very different style, but the funny thing is that their profile still leans quietly toward higher scores in their building. They score around the low 70s themselves, they allow a touch more, and the efficiency they give up, with opponents hitting better than half their shots in effective terms, creates a soft landing spot for visiting offenses. That is how you end up with a team that does not feel like a track meet crew, yet somehow you look back and see that something like 10 of their last 11 home games have gone over the number because the defense keeps nudging things higher. There is a rhythm to those nights, with the crowd getting into every little run, and both sides finding just enough offense to keep the scoreboard moving instead of stalling out. Put those two identities together, the high-tempo, high-volume visitors and the quietly leaky hosts, and you get a matchup that naturally points toward a lively total without needing any wild outlier performances. The season averages stack on top of each other in a way that makes a combined score in the mid-range of normal feel completely reasonable, especially if both teams settle into that low to mid-70s neighborhood that fits how they have played. Add in the usual late-game ingredients, the fouls to extend possessions, the free throws, the occasional quick three out of a timeout, and it is easy to imagine this one pushing higher rather than stalling short of expectations. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Baylor versus Houston. Baylor heads into Houston looking a bit like that talented coworker who keeps missing soft deadlines. You know they have the tools, but the consistency is not there yet. The record hovering just above even tells that story, and the defense that has been giving up points in bunches reinforces it. Houston, by contrast, has been living in the gym and it shows. The Cougars have stacked wins, stayed near the top of the rankings, and very recently turned Colorado into a highlight reel for themselves with that huge blowout at home. The style contrast is pretty clear even if you ignore the advanced charts for a second. Baylor loves to score, and they can fill it up, but the price they pay is that their defense springs leaks all over the place. Houston leans into the grind instead. The Cougars are built on pressure, physicality, and long, draining possessions where opponents find themselves working deep into the shot clock. And sometimes it feels like every catch comes with a body check. You see that in their efficiency numbers, with a top-shelf defense and a margin that marks them as one of the truly elite groups this season, not just a feel-good story. Analytics sites like KenPom back up what the eye test already tells you. Houston sits near the very top in overall efficiency, with a defense that squeezes the life out of possessions and a methodical tempo that forces teams to play their game. Baylor sits much lower, with an offense that grades well but a defense that looks more average or worse when stacked against high major competition. So you end up with one team that is comfortable winning games in a slow, physical style and another that prefers rhythm and space, which is usually a rough mix on the road. The Fertitta Center itself matters too. Houston has turned that place into a fortress, piling up home wins over the last few seasons and making it feel like visiting teams are playing into a headwind for 40 minutes. Late season games in that building often feel like dress rehearsals for March. The crowd is loud, every stop gets a roar, and the physical style has an extra edge. That kind of environment tends to reward the side that already leans into toughness and structure instead of the one that needs flow and comfort. Individual names only underline the broader story, even if this handicap is not about one-player heroics. Cameron Carr gives Baylor a dynamic scorer who can heat up and carry stretches. And that big outing against UCF shows how dangerous he can be when he gets rolling. On the other side, Milos Uzan has been steering Houston's offense, logging heavy minutes and still finding the energy to put up a big scoring night very recently even after dealing with some bumps and bruises. Both guys are active and central, but the bigger theme is that Houston can lean on depth and system defense, while Baylor often needs their star to keep them afloat when stops are hard to find. When you blend that with the home edge and the gap in defensive reliability, the more reasonable expectation is that Houston's pressure accumulates over time. The game tilts more and more their way on the scoreboard, and the margin grows beyond a 1 or 2 possession sweat. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Cougars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, Houston's slow pace and elite defense suggest a lower scoring grind, the sort of game where every possession feels heavy. Baylor's profile pulls in the opposite direction. The Bears regularly play in up-tempo, high-scoring contests, putting a big number on the board themselves while also giving plenty back on the other end. So you have a classic push and pull between pace control and offensive fireworks. Baylor's games tend to land in a high combined range because they simply do not get many stops. Their defense concedes solid shooting percentages both inside and out, and that shows up in those box scores where the opponent quietly creeps into the 70s or 80s while Baylor keeps firing away. That kind of defense travels, unfortunately, and not in a good way. Even when the offense is a bit off, the lack of resistance can turn an ordinary shooting night for the opponent into something that looks much friendlier on the scoreboard. Houston does not usually race up and down, but that does not mean they cannot score. The Cougars have shown they can put up a big number when the matchup allows it, like that recent blowout where they sailed past the century mark while still locking down defensively. That game was a good reminder that a deliberate team can still end up in a high-scoring spot if they force turnovers, get easy transition looks, and live at the free throw line. Against a defense like Baylor's, all three of those things are on the table. Model projections that simulate this kind of clash tend to land in a range where the combined score sits comfortably above what you might expect from a pure defensive slugfest. They account for Baylor's ability to score even against good defenses and their habit of giving up efficient looks on the other end. Even if one side controls tempo for long stretches, the combination of shot-making, fouls, and late-game possessions where the trailing team keeps pushing can inflate the final total. It is not hard to imagine one team getting into the low 80s and the other sitting in the low or mid-60s, and that math nudges things toward a more generous overall number. There is still a path to a lower total if the game bogs down into a true half-court war, with both sides missing shots and the officials letting contact go. That scenario always exists in college basketball, especially late in the season. But when you balance Baylor's offensive punch, their defensive issues, and Houston's capacity to punish mistakes and get easy points even at a measured pace, the more convincing script features enough clean looks and free throws for the combined score to end up higher rather than lower. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. USC versus Washington. This matchup in Seattle feels like a mood check more than a simple numbers game. USC shows up with that shiny 18-11 record. Washington comes in at 14-15, and if you only glance at the standings, you probably tilt Trojan without a second thought. The surface story, though, misses how these teams look underneath the hood, where Washington actually grades out as the slightly stronger Big Ten profile on neutral metrics despite sitting below 500, while USC's efficiency has been sliding right along with its recent results. Senior night at Alaska Airlines Arena adds some extra noise, literally and emotionally. This same building just packed itself for Detlef Schrempf's jersey retirement against Wisconsin, and even in a lopsided loss, you could feel how much juice that crowd can generate when there is a reason to stand for a full timeout. Now fast forward a few days, hand the mic to the seniors, keep the lights a touch lower for pregame, and you get one of those environments where the home team usually feeds off the moment a little harder with every loose ball and every whistle. Washington's recent results tell the story of a team that is better than its record but still fragile around the edges. They handled Minnesota with comfort, owned the glass, and turned a tight game into a double-digit win, then went back east and muscled out a tough road victory at Rutgers where the interior scoring and rebounding traveled just fine. The Wisconsin game in between was ugly for the Huskies, no way around it, but that one felt like a perfect storm of emotion, fatigue, and a Badger team that shot the lights out on a night built around ceremony as much as basketball. The common thread in all of this is the front court star who gives Washington a real identity. Hannes Steinbeck is not just a nice freshman story, he is the system right now, living in that sweet spot where he is averaging a double-double, stacking one high-level performance after another, and setting the tone physically every single night. When your big man is putting up over 18 points and 11 boards per game, leading the league in rebounds, and piling up double-doubles at a rate that has him mentioned with some serious historical company, it simplifies the offense in the best way. Washington can throw the ball into the post, cut off him, crash the glass behind him, and trust that they will at least win the effort battle in the paint. The backcourt fits that personality too. Zoom Diallo plays with a mix of patience and swagger that you want from your lead guard, scoring in the mid-teens, creating for teammates, and giving them a late-clock bailout option without needing everything to turn into isolation hero ball. He and the rest of the guards are not perfect. The turnovers pop up, but they attack downhill, hit enough shots to keep defenses honest, and treat missed shots as passes to Steinbach and the other bigs anyway. Even the rotation questions point in Washington's favor for this specific matchup. They are thin in spots with guys like Mehdi Traore out long-term and Frank Kepnang still in that perpetual "how many minutes can he give them" zone, yet the front court depth chart is still stacked with size and length between Steinbach, Kepnang, Lathan Somerville, and Christian Nitu. That kind of front line matters against a USC group that loves to live at the rim and at the foul line. On the other side, USC feels like a team that peaked before conference play really kicked them in the shins. They ripped through the early schedule, even cracked the rankings for a moment, then ran headfirst into the Big Ten grind and now walk into Seattle riding a 5-game losing streak after dropping decisions to Ohio State, Illinois, Oregon, UCLA, and Nebraska. The record looks fine. The recent film looks like a group trying to rediscover what its offensive structure is supposed to be when the whistle does not bail them out and the jumpers stop falling. Personnel only makes that puzzle more complicated. Rodney Rice gave them a dynamic scoring and playmaking guard presence until the shoulder injury shut him down for the season, and that loss is not just about points, it is about late clock shot creation and someone who can shift matchups on the perimeter. Chad Baker-Mazara was their leading scorer and a matchup nightmare on the wing, but he is gone from the program now, which leaves a scoring hole that is very hard to fill in February without reworking the entire pecking order. Ezra Ausar and Jacob Coffey can absolutely bully people inside and on the offensive glass, yet if the whistle is tight or they get nudged into foul trouble, USC suddenly leans on young guards and role players who have not had to carry this kind of load on the road. Stylistically, that creates a very specific kind of clash. USC wants to mash their way inside, lean on their free throw rate, and turn every close game into a parade to the stripe, while Washington wants to use that same physicality to wall up at the rim and then run their offense through post touches, cuts, and crash after crash on the boards. The team that controls the paint, both on first shots and on rebounds, probably decides how this spread looks after 40 minutes. Given that Washington already went into Galen Center earlier this season and beat this same USC group by playing exactly that brand of basketball, now returns home to a louder building and faces a Trojan roster that is thinner than it was that night, the tilt toward the Huskies getting margin again feels pretty natural. As our first pick for this matchup, the Washington Huskies to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Both teams average solid point totals over the season, and USC especially has put up some big numbers when things get loose, yet the way their recent Big Ten games have played out tells a different story, with more grind, more physical half-court possessions, and fewer clean transition chances than their early schedule suggested. Washington's profile adds another wrinkle. The Huskies are not racing up and down for 40 minutes. They are leveraging Steinbach post touches, guard drives, and a steady diet of half-court actions that use the clock while hunting high-percentage looks in the paint. That kind of offense tends to produce a lot of trips where 3/4 of the shot clock disappears in handoffs, post entries, and reset after reset until someone finally gets downhill or into a hook shot. Even their recent high-scoring wins against teams like Minnesota and Rutgers came more from efficiency and interior dominance than from playing at a blistering tempo from wire to wire. USC, for its part, can absolutely push the pace in spurts, but the version of the Trojans walking into this game is not the free-flowing non-conference group from November. Without Rice to steady things and without Baker-Mazara as that wing flamethrower, a lot of their offense has turned into grinding through first and second options, hoping that Ausar or Kofi can bail them out inside or that a whistle arrives to reset the possession at the stripe. That approach naturally eats clock, especially on the road where you do not always get the friendly whistle or the extra burst in transition. There is also the simple human element of scheduling. Washington is coming off that emotional Jersey event against Wisconsin, which turned into a long night, and then jumped straight into senior night with another emotionally charged, physical matchup where every possession will feel a little heavier for tired legs. Games in that spot can absolutely spike in chaos, but more often they drift toward deliberate half-court basketball, fewer deep bench minutes, and coaches squeezing every possession like it is March already. Defensively, the pieces on the floor point much more toward resistance at the rim than toward a fireworks show. Steinbach, Kepnang, and the rest of Washington's bigs give them a serious wall inside, and even when they give up something on the perimeter or commit fouls, they do force opponents to work through a lot of contact and length to get clean looks close to the basket. USC's own interior size means they are not exactly sprinting shooters off the line and then switching 5 spots. They are trying to leverage their strength and shot blocking near the cup, which again tilts things toward contested twos and longer, more bruising possessions on both ends. When you put it all together, you get two teams with the tools to score, sitting inside a very emotional environment, both leaning on physical interior play, both sitting on recent stretches where the offense has bogged down whenever the whistle or the shooting luck has gone against them. That feels a lot more like a game that grinds in the 60s or low 70s most of the time than one that reliably turns into a true up-and-down shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.